So the Tokyo Olympic Games have been reshaped by the global pandemic for sure, and less than a week in, they're being defined by a completely different challenge: mental health. Dr. Ricardo Whyte is a psychiatrist with Dignity Health Community Hospital of San Bernardino, and he joins us now live via Zoom to talk about the pressure these athletes face. Good morning, Dr. Whyte. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Morning, Dr. Whyte.
Good morning, Giselle. Good morning, Melvin. So pleased to be with you.
Oh, we're so pleased to have you to give context to what's happening, because Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka and Michael Phelps, they all brought to the forefront the challenges so many, even elite athletes, have with mental health issues. And it's important that it comes to the forefront because it's probably more prevalent than we know, isn't it?
Absolutely. See, Giselle, we have an understanding to some degree of the body. We have some appreciation of the brain. But too often, we do not understand the importance of the mind. If, for example, I use the example of a light bulb, so the bulb would represent the body and the brain. But when that light comes on, that's when you have the mind, the essence and the core of who we are. And it's important that we be sensitive to understand how important it is that our mind be healthy.
Absolutely. And you know what else, in situations like this, I couldn't help but think about and G and I talked about it here on the show, the extraordinary amount of courage that it took for Simone Biles to make such a vulnerable disclosure. And then the shame too, like the shame spiral, because vulnerability, you know, is attached to shame. So could you just speak on just that just a bit?
Well, you know, it's interesting that here it is, she would have the courage to say, man down. And whether we think of military or even police references, there are calls where they can say man down. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of acknowledging man down. And then resources can then be deployed, and also other people can step up. But that, from what I saw, that is one strong young lady, and she deserves our support and our appreciation as patriots.
Yeah, you know, the critics have gone after her on social media in these really cruel, vile ways, basically saying you're an elite athlete, you should have more strength and you should suck it up. But, you know, we tend to diminish the mental health challenges that we have, and it's so, as Mel says, attached to shame. We got to get past it, because we're looking at the whole person and the full athlete. And she even said her life was, you know, she felt that she would be at risk if she went forward. So she was actually looking out for herself, wasn't she?
She absolutely was. And other athletes are looking at her and seeing what it is that she's going to go through, or what they may go through if they acknowledge that, hey, I'm at the breaking point. I learned in chemistry that a way to identify a compound is identifying its melting point. We all have a melting point.
God, I love your analogies.
That I'm approaching my melting point, let's acknowledge that and let's respond so that others feel safe to proclaim that. And we can look at the systems that are bringing people to their melting point and fix that as well.
And also, this COVID year, you know, of the Olympics, it's a different environment than the athletes are in. Their major support constructs are not able to be present. And I think there's been, you know, you've seen it even with not only Simone Biles, but Caleb Dressel. He won the 100-meter freestyle. And when they showed a video of his family back home, he was so emotional because that support system was not there. So talk about the effects there with not having family and friends.
You're talking about compounding stressors. You're talking about, for example, the fact that with Simone, she had experienced, you know, the sexual abuse. You're talking about the isolation and the nuances that were caused by COVID, and that, as you've alluded to, other athletes have had to experience. As human beings, we were not made for separation. You know, we thrive on when we can collaborate and interact with one another. And so for these athletes to experience the pinnacle of stress and then to be isolated from some of their support groups, their social support groups, in the traditional way that they can experience it, this was a very tall order.
And Dr. Whyte, because we have limited time left, what is your advice to athletes, or just human beings in general, when they have to perform and have to show up and they're not feeling great and they're struggling? What is your advice to them?
When you've done the best that you can, and you proclaim that I need help, that is a sign of strength and not weakness. When you need some time for yourself, you're valuable enough to have the right to claim that. And it's important that you take the time to look into a mirror and proclaim, I have value. And you say that until you believe it.
I have value beyond what I do and how I perform. I, as a human being, must take care of myself.
And even when that shame starts to creep in, right? Even when that shame starts to creep in.
Especially when that shame starts to creep in.
Dr. Whyte,
I have value.
Thank you so much. Your words will resonate as this Friday into the weekend and hopefully beyond. We needed to hear this great insight. Thank you so very much. We hope to have you back.
Thank you, Dr. Whyte.
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Melvin, for having me.
Have a great weekend, and we'll be right back.
I have value.
We all have value beyond what we do.
That's right. We'll be back, everybody. Stay with us.